it's like, if it works, and it does,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not trivial. It's not about, am I going to get this job? Is this the right boyfriend or anything like this? It's so profound because astrology is a sign then of order in the universe, right back to Plato, harmony of the spheres. It's so meaningful and it's so spiritual. And it, that's the direction that I like to go, to really, be meeting with the stars.
Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Coelho, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and also global healing. We draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science, consciousness, spirituality, healing, philosophy. And in addition to hosting guest speakers, we offer classes and study groups also on Zoom. There are about 150 video recordings of guest speakers, either lectures or interviews, on our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project. And as a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep Caritas going. If you'd like to support our program, make a donation or become a member on our website. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, which also helps us. Now, let me introduce our speaker for today, Rebekah Hirsch, one of my favorites. Rebekah began studying astrology in the 1980s. I'll admit, Nancy, began studying astrology in the 1980s at the Center for Psychological Astrology in London. She went on to train as a psychospiritual energy healer. That was with Barbara Brennan. She's an advanced level graduate of the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and she's also a facilitator and trainer of the body-mind process of voice dialogue. Rebekah is the author of Charting the Soul, Astrology, Characterology, and the Human Energy Field, bringing together the fields of astrology, psychology, spirituality, and energy healing. She teaches her own online astrology courses. Her aim is for people to gain a personal experience of the energetics of astrology and awareness of the archetypes of the planets as living energies expressing through their own lives. And welcome, Rebekah. And I know you have a class coming up. Would you announce that for anyone who would like to join?
Yes, indeed. I'm going to be doing a series of 5 classes online. My work is about the archetypes, and I feel astrology is a language of symbols. And so meeting with the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, less in the sort of cerebral mental way, but all as well as that, where do I find the sun? Where do I find the moon in my own being, in my own life, my own energy field? So working with storytelling and with guided meditation, so that you get your own experience of where the sun or Mars or Jupiter is landing in your own life at the moment.
And when does that class start?
July.
Okay.
July.
So let us know and we'll announce it.
I will.
Okay.
I will. It's on a slide, I think. I don't know if I've put the date on, but it will be starting not the first weekend of July, because that's just after July the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be the weekend after that, which I think is July the 5th.
Okay. Yeah. I love your approach to astrology because you use both sides of the brain. You
Yes.
use left brain and right brain. And
Absolutely.
I think that's a much more wholesome and holistic approach to astrology, which includes spirituality and mythology and all of that.
Yes, I come from a long line of scientists, mathematicians, and so when I started studying astrology when I was young, there was a bit of a like, really, astrology? Because, you know, astrology is not popular with scientists.
Right.
And then as the years have gone by, all my studies, and you'll know this as well, Gloria, it's like, this works, this is real, astrology is real, it's happening. And so then for me, it's like, if it works, and it does, and it's not trivial, it's not about, am I going to get this job? Is this the right boyfriend or anything like this? It's so profound, because astrology is a sign then of order in the universe, you know, right back to Plato, harmony of the spheres. It's so meaningful and it's so spiritual, and it, you know, that's the direction that I like to go, to really, you know, be meeting with the stars.
Yeah. So you have a presentation you want to start?
Yes.
Okay. So Rebekah's going to share her screen.
It's that one. Here we go. There we go. Yes. I put this slide together as a bit of a joke because I don't think there's many people, certainly in the Western world, are thinking that we're having an easy time of it. And you know, I think especially for a lot of Americans, a lot of my American friends are very, very shaken by what is occurring. And it's not great over here as well. So I just wanted to, you know, one of the things that I want to focus on in this talk is to get an understanding of what's going on with the astrology. I know a lot of people are talking about it. We are living, let me just go through to this one, in these extraordinary times. Sometimes astrologers make a big fuss about things like when Mercury goes retrograde, or we have an eclipse of the moon or something. And these things are actually very common. Mercury goes retrograde all the time. But one of the things that is happening this year is that you probably all know that Pluto is now at the beginning of Aquarius. Like about 2 weeks ago, Neptune entered Aries. And on July the 7th, just after July the 4th, Uranus enters Gemini. So all three of the big outer planets are changing signs within about 10 months. And that never happens. It's not that it happened, you know, a couple of 100 years ago or something. That just never happens. And there are other things going on I'm not even going to talk about, like Saturn is going to be conjunct Neptune in the next week or so at 0 degrees of Aries at the very beginning of the zodiac. You know, these are quite big things. And that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I don't know if people can read a chart, but that's Saturn and that's Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries, bang on the IC of the chart of the United States of America. So that is the lowest point, the Iccium Coli, the lowest point of the chart. And it's like the root of the tree. And, you know, and America is getting, you know, shaken up, because here at the root are this enormous shift of Saturn and Neptune going together into Aries. And this is interesting, I think. This is looking forward to July the 7th, the day that, Uranus enters Gemini, or just after. And we get this wonderful thing. And if I won't do a lot of technical astrology if people are not astrologers, but we've got Uranus exactly conjunct Mars at 3 degrees of Gemini. We've got Pluto at 4 degrees of Aquarius, and we've got Neptune at 4 degrees of Aries. and then we've also got Jupiter at 0 degrees of Leo, and this makes what's called a trapeze. And it's quite a harmonious thing. It means that these big outer planets, as they are shifting signs, they're working together. They're working through trines and sextiles, and the signs that they are in are air and fire signs. So there's quite a lot of flow and lightness in there. And the other thing that's happening, which is not so easy, is Chiron, the archetype of the wounded healer, just entering Taurus, and it's square to Pluto and square to Jupiter. So just there's a lot going on. That was the main thing, is that, okay, so we're in this, these turbulent times. Oh, that's my course, but I still haven't got the date on. But it'd be these, sorry, I'll come back to that. No, that's, well, I suppose it's significant. So what I'm going to be doing in this talk is looking at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Actually, I'm looking at Pluto first. What are these archetypes? What are these planets? What do they symbolize? What do they represent? What do they want? So, nothing is as it was. And I don't think it's ever going to be the same again. I don't think, maybe, you just have to fight, maybe in a few years' time, it'll go back, but I doubt it. I think we're being asked, and a lot of astrologers are saying this, that it is a very spiritual time. And, that sounds much too glib. There are absolutely terrible things happening in the world. And I never want to do spiritual bypass and say that some of the war zones that we are seeing and the individual lives that are being buffeted by what is occurring politically, those are individual tragedies and they are global tragedies. However, so I suppose what my point in this, the message in this talk is, we are in this time of huge change. There's so much is going on in the skies. And then if we can understand Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus and the signs that they are in, it helps us then to get a sense of what is trying to happen. I mean, either what is occurring is just like the human race is just, had it and we're not going to make it, or we're being asked to make big changes. And I think we are. I think we're being asked, not just to read another book or do another course, but there's a real shift of consciousness that is trying to occur. And so thinking about, these planets, just sometimes to understand the archetype of the planet, you can look at what was happening at the time that they were discovered. And I think a lot of people know Uranus was discovered in 1781 at the time of the great revolutions, the American Revolution and the French Revolution. We've said that Uranus is entering 0 degrees Gemini, which happened at the time of the American Declaration of Independence, So, but particularly if we think of the discovery of Uranus and these great revolutions, where basically, this very Aquarian, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, there's the injustice of the incredible poverty that the serfs and the ordinary people were living in, compared to in France, the wealth of the aristocrats that became intolerable, and the decisions made by the king and the taxes on the people. And in America, it's no, we're the land of the free, and we're done with the British rule. And if we want to think about the archetype of Neptune, at the time of the discovery of Neptune, there were a lot of medical advances happening, and the development of nursing, understanding, including germ theory. There's also widespread use of opium. There was the discovery of hypnosis, and it was the time of the Romantic movement in art and music. It's also the time of the Great Famine of Ireland, and also opium. These are all little, clues about Neptune. And Pluto, of course, discovered much more recently in 1930, at the time when the scientists were working on the splitting of the atom and the development of nuclear power. It was also the rise of fascism, the rise of the Nazis. Which is not to say that Pluto always has to, but it's one of those things about power, because Pluto goes with power. And also it was a period with with the flowering, the growth of psychological awareness from people, the great Freud and Jung and others.
I've always found it interesting how synchronicity seems to play into, when a planet is discovered, what's going on. And then as we study the planet and observe through the decades, centuries, ages, it turns out that planet seems to really represent those things, those energies that were prominent when they were discovered. It's so interesting, that synchronicity.
Yes. And
like when they come into our consciousness,
into the collective, that somehow the human race is ready for this particular bit of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole human race is ready for Uranus, which represents freedom, and they're ready for Neptune, which actually goes with compassion. And then eventually, 1930s, we have to look at our relationship to power.
Mm-hmm.
So the planet arrives or comes into consciousness, because it was always there. Through, as Gloria said, through synchronicity at the moment when the human collective is ready.
Yeah, and at the moment when what the planet represents in our lives and in astrology is happening on, is prominent on the planet. Yeah. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Pluto. So, we can have scary thoughts about Pluto as the Lord of Death. And that's all kinds of death. It doesn't have to mean physical death, but it certainly goes with endings, with things that are, coming to their time. But I think as much as it goes with death, it goes with power. So we talked about the atom bomb, but in human life, it goes with kind of the opposite end of the body from the head, like just not about the brain. It's about instincts and guts, and it's just the power in the cells, the power of the cells to generate life, to use oxygen, burn sugar, and so give us the energy to move. And it's your relationship to your own life force. So it's not mental. It's not, it's kind of emotional, but it's the body, it's the, because the Pluto goes with the unconscious. I've got a lot of slides of Pluto, actually. I'm going to move on. No, too many. This one. So it's things. Well, I will move on. It's things that one of the things that goes with Pluto is the shadow. Things that we push out of consciousness. So we have our rational mind, which we like to keep in the light, and we like to think of happy thoughts and so on. And there are things in our families growing up, things in our peer group, our friendship groups, and so on, that we find are not acceptable. Those things get pushed into the unconscious. Sometimes they emerge in dreams, but sometimes they emerge in other ways in our life. But this is the shadow. So an individual person will have things that they've pushed out of consciousness and into the shadow. And quite often, if you come from, a nice spiritual family, it may be anger that gets, we don't do conflict, we don't do anger, that gets pushed into the shadow. But in another family where there's more aggression, we don't cry. We don't, oh my God, the British don't, we don't do crying. We don't do vulnerability. Those are things that end up in the shadow. And these are some other things in the shadow. There's things from your, there's so much out there now about the ancestral inheritance. That if your ancestors experienced trauma, it will appear in the DNA of the next generation and the next one. It's like when trauma occurs and it's not dealt with, goes into the unconscious, and then it gets built into the body and gets built into the personality. So this is very much the work of Jung. The need to be willing to embrace the shadow. And I do remember my teacher, Liz Green, saying to us, if you think you know what's in your shadow, that's not it. Because that's in consciousness. Yeah. It's something that, and it's, we don't like what's in shadow. We fear it because for whatever reason, it became something to be afraid of when we were growing up in childhood. And Pluto also represents the shadow of the collective. It will represent the shadow of a nation, of a society, and so on. And I think with Pluto in Aquarius, we are seeing Pluto always works to bring things to the surface of consciousness. When Pluto was in Capricorn, which it was for the last 18 years, odd years, no, more than that. Anyway, that Capricorn is the sign to do with civilization. It has to do with politics, it has to do with the law, the police, with finances, with trade, with banking. And any kind of authority and the structures of our civilization. And when the minute that Pluto went, like in about a few weeks after Pluto went into Capricorn, we had the great financial crash of 2008. And that is Pluto saying, your finances, this is not, they're not being well run. These things are wrong. Then we had things like WikiLeaks revealing classic Pluto, out from the underworld come all these military secrets. Then we have Panama Papers and the other, about where we see, oh my God, this is where the wealthy are putting, this is where all the wealth is going, the Panama Papers. We had Harvey Weinstein and all the allegations of sexual harassment and rape and so on. Then we have the Me Too movement, where this great wave of women across social media are opening up that they've experienced. Again, we had poor old, sadly, Bill Cosby, a national hero. And we discover, again, Pluto's working, saying this is happening. This is going on in places of power, in the entertainment industry and other industries, had the same thing happening in the UK. And then, Black Lives Matter. What is going on in our police force? And in the UK, we had the same thing when tragic murder of a young woman by a policeman. What is going on with misogyny? Anyway, this is Pluto bringing all these things to the surface, saying, look at this. This is what your society is running. Well, we've had a good old shake up with Pluto and Capricorn, and now Pluto is at the beginning of Aquarius. And the impetus to start doing this talk is looking what is happening with Trump and Musk and and the politics? What does that mean about Pluto in Aquarius? So what do we? So what does Pluto want? Pluto goes with a lot of. Oh, this is one of my favorite stories to go with Pluto. Hercules, the great hero, he had many tasks. We'll be talking about another one later on. But one of his tasks, this is Hercules here. There was a village that was being terrorized by the Hydra, which was a monster with 9 snake heads. And his task was to go and kill it. And the Hydra lived in a swamp. It lived in the dark. It lived in the shadow. It lived under a great green cloud. So the light of day never, ever got there. This is the underworld. This is the unconscious. And Hercules, of course, was fearless and incredibly strong. And he went into the swamp to deal with the Hydra. And what he discovered, he started chopping off the heads of the Hydra, which were deadly poisonous. But he's pretty tough. And he discovered that where he chopped one head off, 2 would grow in its place. So he's got one hell of a problem happening here. And in the end, what he did, he got down into the swamp. He got right down into the muck and everything. He got underneath the Hydra and he lifted it up above the cloud and into the light of day. And once the rays of the sun hit the Hydra, it immediately died. And this is such a perfect story for Pluto. What is in the unconscious? What is being hidden? If you try and fight it on its own terms, 2 heads will grow where you chop the previous one off. And in the end, you bring it into the light of consciousness, the light of love, the light of spirit. And
it's Pluto, it's regeneration.
And it's, we've got that coming. This is something else about Pluto. A plutocracy is where everything is about the money. And I think all of our governments and civilizations have gone in the 21st century. We all seem to have descended into that pit where it all becomes about money. And but I thought that was interesting that Pluto, the Greeks didn't like Hades very much, but the Romans had a better relationship with Pluto. And the word Pluton means the riches, means the wealthy one. So as well as being the lord of the dead and everything to do with power and the abuse of power and corruption of those things, Pluto also has to do with riches. And it's as though if like Hercules, we can get down and lift the Hydra up into the light of day, or like Aladdin in the cave, if we can stay true to ourselves, somehow then what will come is some kind of riches, which also has to do with Pluto, that when that work of consciousness is done, then it doesn't mean physical riches necessarily, but there is, whatever is buried under the ground, whatever is in the unconscious, whatever is in the shadow may feel very uncomfortable to begin with. But if we can hold it and transform it, then it's just life force, and it might have got wonderful things in there. And very much as Laura just said, yes, he's the angel of death, but Pluto also rules birth. It absolutely does, and it's the phoenix that rises from the ashes, the whole process of transformation, the metamorphosis. And it's as though in this time, because the entry of these planets into the beginnings of signs feels very significant. It's like they want our attention. We want to know what Pluto in Aquarius is about. And there are things that may need to die. There are things that we may need to give up on. Lots of things, I don't know, lots of abuses of power probably need to come to an end. But it's also a time of birth and it's rebirth. It's the phoenix. Something is wanting to be reborn, renewed. When Pluto, now Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, so there's not exactly a hurry. And perhaps we don't yet know precisely what something, but this is in the end what Pluto is about. You know, that one of the myths, I won't go back, to do with Pluto is the myth of Medusa, who had the head of snakes. That if you looked on her face, this is Perseus who went and defeated Medusa, and she's a very tragic figure. You know, she's a monster, and her hair is turned into snakes. And if you look her in the eye, she will turn to stone. And perhaps, you know, that's quite an important aspect of Pluto. She's full of bitterness and negativity. She's had a really tough time, and you know, she doesn't deserve her fate, and she's furious, and she turns people to, with her bitterness, she turns people to stone. But when Perseus, the hero, cuts off her head, out of the body of the dead Medusa, right, comes Pegasus, the winged horse. He's born out of out of the renewal, out of the release, the liberation. So, you know, Medusa, the monster, has died, and what emerges is this beautiful winged horse. And that's what Pluto can offer us. You know, yes, there's something fearful, there's something monstrous, there's something in the shadow that we are afraid of. And then when the hero comes and we are able to bring it into the light of day, then extraordinary. It is the most transformative of all the planets, thinking about personal astrology, that when Pluto comes through, people really, really change. And it can be a very, very difficult time, but they come out, you know, this image here, the lapis philosopharium. It's this idea that in the course of your lifetime, you are building this crystal, which is the embodiment of your soul, of all the qualities that you, of the light that you bring in your life. And with Pluto, it's so much can happen in the way of taking something that is in shadow and turning it into the light and building that wonderful light of soul and the inner crystal. So,
and what you said earlier about power, it seems, you know, you were mentioning that in addition to being a dark time, it's also a time of awakening.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, Pluto rules power and shows us where we're abusing it in terms of using it externally to control power over other people, right? And at the same time, I think it's awakening in us the idea of our authentic power, which is the power within us to transform, to regenerate, you know, which is the real power. It's the real power. And as long as we subscribe and become intimidated by external power, it's very difficult to find our real power.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. That's such an important point, that, you know, this feeling of manipulation, of being controlled by whoever, you know, whoever, the military, the government, your boss, you know, that goes with Pluto, and it can lead to incredible depression, and it can lead to trauma. And just as Gloria said, the message of Pluto is to find your own power in your own, you know, belly and your own instincts. And the message of Pluto in Aquarius is really, really so much about that, about let me see where we yeah, about taking back our sense of power. And I think I see quite a lot of that happening already in America. The judiciary and other people putting up a fight and standing and saying, no, I can't do that. I can't go along with that.
Yeah.
And
being authentic instead of buckling under.
yeah, because the knuckling under is sort of can't become a bit intolerable.
Yeah.
We can't put up with this anymore. It's not like everything's been hunky-dory for decades. It hasn't. This isn't new, and it felt more comfortable, 10, 20 years ago. But this, there still was this feeling of people giving away power. And this is, an Aquarius is very much about egalitarianism. This is the only slide I've got with Aquarius. Oops.
Yeah, it's the power of love versus the love of power, right? Is what
absolutely. Well, and if we look back, yes, the time of the discovery, the time of Pluto is in Aquarius, American Revolution. No, yes, it was. Sorry, Uranus is being discovered, but we didn't know about Pluto back then. But back then, at the time of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, when people are looking for freedom, when it's too unfair, Pluto was in Aquarius. And in the chart of the USA, the chart of the USA has Pluto right at the end of Capricorn. So all the 20 years following the Declaration of Independence, we have Pluto in Aquarius, trying to sort it out. What kind of a society are we going to create? Oh, this is an interesting little bit of mythology. Well, this is to do with Pluto in Aquarius. So what do we mean by Aquarius? And Alice Bailey was an esoteric philosopher, spiritual person in the early 20th century, and she talked about the Greek mythology, the 12 labors of Hercules, the hero, and she gave each one of the labors to a different sign, and the task, because he had to do these tasks as a punishment. And the task that she associated with Aquarius was when he was asked to clean out the Augean stables. These were these massive stables with these giant, terrifying horses with unbeatable, massive, monstrous horses. Nobody could clean the stables out because the horses were terrifying and could kill people. They hadn't been cleaned out in 30 years. And one of the tasks of Hercules, he's got to clean it out. And he did this because he diverted 2 rivers to flow and opened the doors of the stables, and the rivers flowed through and swept all the muck away. And I think that is a great image for what is trying to happen in our times. It's like, yes, it's like, no, we need to clean the house out. And that's exactly what Hercules did. And that's, just for, Aquarius, I think there's been a lot of talk about we're entering the age of Aquarius. We sure are entering the age of Aquarius. It lasts for 2,000 years. So we don't have to jump up and down and get too excited. We are right at the very beginning of the age of Aquarius. And one of the things that goes with Aquarius is the love of humanity, the love of the human race, and goes with groups and friendships. But I think we're getting, now that we are on that road, we're entering the age of Aquarius, I think we're getting an insight into groups that was not available until now. Because there's something about when people come together with good heart, with good intention, with loving intention, looking for spirit, when you meditate together, something else occurs. And it's very, very powerful. And I think Pluto in Aquarius, Pluto in the power, and this, because all over the world, people are meeting in groups. All the young people that I know in London, there's a generation coming through who were born in the 1990s, who have a Neptune Uranus conjunction in Capricorn, and they love astrology and they love spirituality. And they are looking for mystical breakthroughs and spiritual awareness, big time. And I feel this wave is coming for sure. You go out on social media and you will meet an awful lot of rubbish about astrology. You'll meet an awful lot of rubbish about spirituality. There are terrible groups which turn into cults and stuff like that. Nevertheless, this is the time for people to come together. And I think that something is happening that we couldn't even have anticipated, in the 20th century. Oops, no, let's go back. Let's do this. So you may have heard of Teilhard de Chardin, you may not. He's born in the 19th century, died in mid 20th century. He was a Catholic, he was a Jesuit priest, but he was an absolutely inspired philosopher who gave the most wonderful talks, and his books are totally inspiring. He was a scientist, he was a paleontologist, he studied evolution. And when he was a young man, evolution was still quite a new idea. Darwin's ideas were not that old, and he was part of a team of archaeologists and paleontologists that discovered the missing link with. So he's a world expert on the theory of the biology of evolution. But his spiritual message is that the biologically evolution has come to an end. We don't see any new giraffes forming. There's not. There's suddenly a new kind of tiger. Far from it, in fact. And he said, now we have got our biology kind of sorted to a certain level of complexity. The next step is the expansion of consciousness and the increasing complexity of consciousness. And in his view, he saw this wonderful river of life, of evolution, flowing to an end point, which he called the omega point, when the human race returns to oneness with the divine, with God. And he says that consciousness is not a byproduct of evolution, but it is the driving force, that we are seeking consciousness, and that and that we see, in our world in wonderful ways, the expansion of consciousness. When I was young, the time of the Vietnam War, but there was this exchange starting to happen between Western culture and Eastern culture. The young people coming back from India and teaching yoga, and going to China and bringing back the I Ching and the Taoism. And this merging happened between all the different spiritual ideas in the world. And of this growth in spirituality that we see, across the world now, people learning to meditate. Nobody could meditate when I was a child, but now everybody can. I was in my swimming pool the other day, and these two ladies going off to a meditation class. I didn't even know what meditation was when I was 20. I like this as well. The immense fulfillment of the friendship between those engaged in furthering the evolution of consciousness as a quality impossible to describe. We are collaborators in creation. And that's so Aquarian, friendship, Aquarius, the sign of friendship. The principle of evolution. Aquarius looks to the future. we'll talk about that a bit. We'll keep an eye on the time. So here we go. Here we are with needing to clear out the stables. Neptune. Do you know, I was sitting there looking at this and thinking, Neptune going into Aries. Neptune is going into Aries. What does that mean? They could not be further apart, Neptune and Aries, you know, the way I was thinking about it. Neptune very much associated with Jesus Christ, the sign of Pisces, with the Christ consciousness, but very much with spirituality and mysticism, and also with with the ocean and with this breaking down of boundaries. This is Neptune, unbounded. You know, all of life is one, and if you know, compassion, empathy, are some of the qualities we associate with Christ. If you are in pain, I feel it. Goes with healers. You know, the Neptune is big in the chart of all healers because it's the ability to feel the vibration of another person and to feel on an emotion. It's a water sign. You know, it's not like Pluto, which is much more fiery. That this is Neptune, which is all about the water, and how when you are in your heart, then you feel and the suffering of another being. You know, so empathy, compassion, and enormous difficulty with hurting another person because I immediately feel it. It goes with other things, but I think that's really what the essence of Neptune is about, is oneness of all of life, and the longing for the communion of spirit, communion of the heart. And Aries, you know, it's this guy here, it's the hero. Aries goes with war and with fighting and anger and so on. And I was really kind of stuck, like, what does this mean? And what does it mean when Neptune goes into Aries? You know, if somebody's got too much Aries, you want them to find a bit of, too much Neptune. If somebody is so Neptunian that they're kind of lost in cosmic consciousness and they can't get their feet on the ground, then you want them to go and find a bit of Aries and find a bit of fight and create a bit of boundaries. And it finally dawned on me. One thing I think that's worth mentioning, the last time that Neptune went into Aries, the last time that Neptune entered 0 degrees of Aries was the day of the declaration of the American Civil War. And that, you know, I think I found that very interesting. Not that history repeats itself. I don't think it does. I think we go into spiral. I don't think we go around in circles. But to a large extent, I know there were other things going on in the American Civil War, but it was a war of compassion because it was the war to end slavery. And you know, is it that we've come round to the next turn of the spiral? And it's not like there's just slavery in America, slavery all over the world. We have modern day slavery, we have wage slavery, we have sex trafficking, we have child trafficking, you know, very scary things. You know, all our goods that are made in China, you know, the reason they're so cheap is because they're able to use slave labor. It hasn't gone away. And then it sort of, you know, finally occurred to me that Neptune in Aries it immediately made me think of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. It's a different mythology, not the Greek mythology. I'm not the biggest fan of the Greek myths because they're very, very patriarchal. Mm. Whereas in the mythology, the stories of King Arthur, it's the realm of chivalry. And Arthur's declaration was that the strength and the might of his warriors, of his knights, was to be put into the service of the weak and the vulnerable, that their duty was to protect the old and to protect women and to protect children. And boy, have we forgotten that in our times. Boy, have we turned that upside down. And Arthur came in to deal with the robber barons and the knights who were using their power simply to terrorize people. And I think we see an awful lot of terrorism of the powerful in the world at the moment. And here comes Neptune in Aries, and it just became so clear to me that this is what Arthur was about. Is you use your Aries, your fire, your power, your fight for the service of Neptune, and this is Neptune. This is these are some of the big archetypes go with Neptune. The Lady of the Lake, who lives in the water, lives in the lake, and brings the sword, the magical sword Excalibur, to Arthur to give him the power to create the realm of Logos, to build Camelot, to for the brief time to have that light. And Lady Blanchefleur, who is the Grail Maiden, who carries the Holy Grail. Well, the Holy Grail is such a symbol of Neptune. It is, it's a container. It's like the moon. It's a feminine. It's a bowl that contains this light of spirit. And the Holy Grail comes to Camelot, and it goes round. I think this is a picture of it here. Oops, no, go back. Yes, this is when the Holy Grail comes to Camelot, and it floats in through the door and it goes around, and then they start the quest of the Holy Grail. And by the way, the round table, again, this is very Aquarian, because in the round table, you're all equal. You can all see each other. And I think in our times, it's very, very important that we start doing things in circles with that Aquarian recognition that every human being is of a value. Nobody is more value. Yes, we like leaders. We need our Aries energy. We need our Martian heroes. But in the end, we need that circle where nobody is more important than anyone else. That's the spirit of Aquarius. So the Holy Grail comes to Camelot, and they all the knights go out to search for it. And only 3 ever get to be with it. And one of them is Galahad, who is the purest of all the knights, and he is the one who actually gets to drink of the Holy Grail. But also Sir Percival. And the Grail Maiden, this lady here, is Blanchefleur. And again, this goes so much with Neptune, is the feminine, loving, compassionate, that wants to bring the light of love through to the whole world. And she's the Grail Maiden. She's pure enough to carry it. And eventually, Sir Percival does also get to be in the presence of the Holy Grail. And he then marries Blanchefleur, and they become a great king and queen, and they have a wonderful realm where they maintain those values of chivalry that Arthur brought in until the Dark Ages engulfs them again. Oh, oops, no, this way. Yes. Well, we'll have time for questions later. I'm just thinking if I've missed anything about Uranus, Neptune. I suppose.
Yeah. Would you like me to?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that occurs to me with Neptune is Isabel Hickey says the keynote of Neptune is serve or suffer. Yeah. And so Aries has a wonderful energy of beginnings and identity. Who am I? And Neptune answers that, who am I, with the higher self, with mystical experience, and and in terms of what you were saying about the feminine is so important, because Aries is a masculine sign, and it's a sign of leadership and beginnings. And to bring the feminine into that equation, right? I think it's the feminine energy that has to come to the forefront right now, because we've been so immersed in the patriarchal, in the masculine, and I'm not talking about men and women. I'm talking
No.
about this energy, right? And so Neptune brings that feminine energy to the leadership, to the fore, right? And I love that. I had I heard these words in meditation recently that kind of shook me up a little bit, and it was a very simple statement, just it's time for the awakened ones to lead.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, that's one of the problems, because the awakened ones are not the ones who want power.
Yep.
So they don't tend to be the leaders,
No, not at
right?
all.
But at the same time, I thought about all these huge throngs, crowds of people protesting right now in the United States, all over the country, protesting what's going on. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are, doing these protests on a daily basis, trying to make a point, trying to get attention. And I thought there has to be a lot of awakened ones in those crowds, because they're peaceful. They're
Yes.
not ripping things apart. They're not destroying things. They're not killing people. They're peaceful. They're just trying to make a point and to get the attention, of the world, really, and especially our government, to the fact that they don't agree with what's going on. And so, it's interesting. It's time for the awakened ones to lead. And I think Neptune rules awakening.
Yes.
And Aries rules leadership and beginnings and, identity, that kind of thing. So that's kind of.
Absolutely.
But I loved your whole King Arthur analogy. I just love that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, he's a wonderful King Arthur.
Yeah.
He's not trying to have power at all costs.
Right.
He recognizes the role of power is to serve.
Yes.
And that is
And
so
that's so
missing.
Neptunian.
And it's so Neptunian. And we've forgotten that. I think even in the 20th century, I think a lot of world leaders had some idea that they were there to serve. And that just seems to have gone out of the window. Our value system is upside down. And Sir Galahad, he's the greatest knight on earth. He's got all this kind of strength and power, and he's using it in the service of the divine. He's looking for God. He's looking for the Holy Grail. He finds it, and he's not trying to beat anybody up or steal all their money or anything like that. And I mean, yeah, you could do a whole thing about the knights of the,
Yes.
that King Arthur, he's probably flawed, but his intention was to do good. And
the whole concept of the round table. And
yeah.
also, in terms of, this is a little bit out of step with where we're going, but just going back to Pluto and Aquarius, it occurred to me that, as you said, humanitarianism is the keynote of Aquarius, one of the keynotes of Aquarius, and Pluto is power. And we just elected a new pope who is very much connected, spiritually, it seems, and in favor of service and helping those who need it most, helping the underserved.
Yeah, he seems,
and the immigrants and the refugees. And
he does, at first glance, that absolutely seems, no, I can't see everybody, but never mind.
Yeah, he's very much humanitarian, and I think that the Pluto in Aquarius, that's a step in the right direction.
Totally. And yes, he's been living with the poor, hasn't he? He's been living in the mountains in Peru. He's so not been hanging out with private jets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, just to keep going. Was there something? Anyway, Uranus. So, well, Uranus goes with a lot of things. What else have we got here? Uranus enters. Uranus loves Gemini. A lot of geniuses are born with Gemini. So when I think back to the geniuses of my youth, the rock artists and the pop artists of the 60s and 70s, they all have Uranus in Gemini. And one of the things about Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. It's very, very mental. It's not like Neptune. Neptune's very much of the heart. Uranus is of the head, but it kind of is, seventh chakra and going out into the cosmos. It goes with genius and completely, bringing back completely original. It's kind of going to other dimensions of thought and experience. Now, one of the great archetypes to go with Uranus and with Aquarius is that of Prometheus, who so you've got the Olympian gods ruled by Jupiter or Zeus in the Greek terminology, and Prometheus was not an Olympian god. He was a Titan, but he sort of hung out with the Olympians. He was cool with them. And Prometheus created the human race. He made them out of soil, and he got Pallas Athena to breathe life into them. And he loved the human race. And he went to Zeus and he said, can I give them the fire of Olympus, which is kind of like the light of spirit, the principle of fire? And Zeus said no, he didn't much like the human race and he didn't want them to become very powerful. Prometheus has the ability to see into the future, and he knows what's going to happen. Nevertheless, he goes ahead. He steals the fire from Mount Olympus and he takes it down and he teaches the human race how to use it. And then Zeus looks out and he sees the little fires starting up all over the plains of Greece and he realizes what has happened. He punishes Prometheus by having him chained to a rock in the mountains, and every day an eagle comes down and pecks out his liver, and every night he's immortal, his liver grows back, and he suffers this eternal torment. But Zeus also is going to punish the human race, and he basically goes down to earth. He meets with Epimetheus, who's the brother of Prometheus, and he brings with him Pandora, and Epimetheus falls in love with Pandora, and he leaves Pandora with Epimetheus with the box. And Prometheus, with foresight, has said to Epimetheus what's going to happen. And he said, don't open the box. Don't let anybody open the box. And of course, Pandora can't resist. And she goes in to the room where the box is and opens it. And out come all the spites, all the woes of humanity, sickness, old age, strife, conflict, envy, illness, and so on. And they are out now and they become the plagues that afflict the human race. And she slams the box shut, but then she hears a little knocking and opens it again. And there inside is the spirit of hope, the angel of hope, which is another key word for Aquarius. Prometheus does get released, by the way. Hercules releases him in the end, and they sort of negotiate with Zeus, with Chiron, and so on. The thing about Prometheus is that he sees the future. He's looking to the future. It is this spirit of evolution. He wants things to get better. And he doesn't want the status quo to just carry on and carry on and carry on. He wants the human race to evolve, to grow, and he gives them fire, and that gets them started on their journey, which, Teilhard de Chardin says, that's what it's about. We're evolving towards a total return to unity with the divine. And so you find this in Aquarius, very much this spirit of the group and coming together to make something happen, to make something better. And that, and here comes Uranus. Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, and now it's popping into Gemini, where it's very happy. And Gemini is a very, amazing sign. I mean, one of the things that, people might be afraid of with Uranus going into Gemini, for sure, the Gemini and Uranus are both associated with technology, with computers, and here it is, AI and robotics, and and the possibility that this is going to totally change our society. And is it going to change it for the better? Is it going to free people up to be more creative, or are we all going to turn into robotic slaves? That's on the edge, but that certainly Aquarius goes with computing and technology. Gemini loves computing and technology. Uranus loves it. So here we go. We've got 7 or 8 years of Uranus in Gemini. See what happens. Because always in the end, it's up to us. And, well, here, this is Mercurius, is one of the symbols to go with Gemini. And Gemini is the messenger. He's the messenger god. He's the spirit of communication. He's got these winged sandals and he's flying around, which is why, goes with, to a certain extent, with mobile phones and all of that sort of technology. But Mercurius is a wonderful, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. And in in medieval times, there was the whole study of alchemy. And then in the 20th century, Jung was looking into alchemy as a psychological process, not, so much as like turning lead into gold, which is what the alchemists were trying to do. That this magical process, and in a way, we're back with the shadow, where you take something out of the unconscious that needs to see the light of day, and you bring it into consciousness in therapy, in meditation, in writing, whatever, somehow you discover an aspect of self that needs to bring into the light of consciousness, and through it comes, and Mercurius brings about transformation. Mercury was the only one of the gods that could travel between Mount Olympus and the underworld. So he can go down into the world of the shadow. He can talk to Pluto and Persephone, the queen of the underworld. He can go into the dream world, and he can go into the light of day, and he can be the trickster and the joker, and he can be fooling around with social media and mobile phones. But his, the deepest, most powerful level of Mercury is Mercurius, the principle of transformation, the essence of transformation. You take something that's raw and heavy, just as Prometheus took the clay to create the human race, and you bring in the light of consciousness. And that is quite a process. And then out of that, something new and wonderful can emerge. So we're back here with Uranus entering into Gemini and, buddying up with Mercurius. And trining Pluto, Uranus in Gemini is going to be trine Pluto in Aquarius. And that, Aquarius and Gemini like each other. And Pluto and Uranus couldn't be more different. Uranus is totally of the mind. If Mercury's, your thinking, dreaming mind, Uranus is out in the cosmos. Uranus is talking to beings from other dimensions. Uranus is channeling, wonderful information. And Pluto is down in the guts. And where's the power? Where's your personal power? However, they both like transformation. And so I think I think it's not an impossible combination at all. I think Pluto in Aquarius, trining Uranus in Gemini, it's like giving all that power to putting it into group connections and raising consciousness, expanding consciousness, the evolution of consciousness. And both the planets, Uranus here and Pluto there, they're both sextile to Neptune. Pluto, 4 degrees of Aquarius, Neptune, 4 degrees of Aries, Uranus, 3 degrees, nearly 4 degrees of Gemini. So they're working together. When they're at the same degree like that, they're in very close connection with each other. That's an intense aspect that they're making with each other. Jupiter's getting involved as well, but these three will be kind of working together for some time, and that is so transformational. Because we've got everything that Gloria was saying and that I was saying about Neptune is the healer and the mystic, and the spirit of the healing and love and compassion and empathy, working with these two. I guess you might say that Pluto trine Uranus on its own, that might go with the misuse of power and very mental, because they're both mental signs, Aquarius and Gemini, but there's Neptune in there.
Also, doesn't Uranus rule intuition?
Yeah, absolutely.
Intuitive thinking, right?
Absolutely.
And Pluto rules psychology. So bringing that depth into the Gemini and Aquarius, thinking, intellectual, approach to things, air, could be like a deepening of our thinking, wisdom versus intellect. Right.
Absolutely. The potential here is don't want to exaggerate, but it's wonderful.
Yeah. And even in technology, technology is a double-edged sword. It can help us tremendously. AI can help us tremendously. It can also, take over through transhumanism, the idea of implanting, combining humanity and technology, that is really scary to me. So
absolutely.
But transhumanism versus the freedom that AI can deliver for us if we use it properly and don't let it use us.
That's absolutely what's at stake, I feel, in the time, and, when you talk about people being on the streets in America and peaceful protests, and what else can we bring to this world of ours, which at the moment is being run by, all over the world, rulers who are abusing their power, who are not reaching out to the most vulnerable. They're not, the opposite of King Arthur. They're they're the robber barons. They're taking their power and they're taking all the wealth for themselves, and they're leaving the vulnerable in dire straits.
Right.
And what are we going to do? And I don't know what we're going to do about it, but we'll find out, because Mercurius is here and Uranus is here. Let's go back to Uranus. Prometheus is here. And well, that's our hope. I do believe in free will. I don't believe, I'm not a kind of astrologer who sees the future and says it's all fixed. I don't think that at all. I think, and I know you don't, Gloria, that our journey here is all about freedom of will and making choices. And the astrology will just helps us to make those choices. And we are living in, this never happens. This is incredible, and it's happening now. That's the thing. And I remember talking with astrological friends at the end of the 20th century and looking ahead and thinking, oh, great change. And now that we're in it, it's not very comfortable.
Yeah.
It's a bit heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes. It takes the thing has to break. Everything has to break open. The rivers have to come through the stables, to clean out the muck. And we have to lift the Hydra up into the light of consciousness and go, oh my God, these are the people that have been ruling us.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think to a certain extent, the example of what the US is going through right now is the silver lining is that it seems to be putting people off in other countries that were starting to lean toward autocracy, like Canada and Germany. And, they elected leaders who are not, it looked like they were going to go autocratic also, but they didn't.
Yeah, no, it's
part
wonderful.
of it. Yeah, part of it is seeing what's going on here and that possibility, trying to avoid that possibility. So, yeah.
I've accidentally clicked us out of the screen share. Well, let's just, I will pop back in. But if anybody's got any questions at the moment.
Yeah, let's see, what time is it? Yeah, it's almost 1:30. So yeah, we can open for questions if anyone has them.
Yeah. Or thoughts.
Sharon has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to the discussion of the recently newly elected Pope.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple comments on various podcasts about it, from the perspective of being, as both of you sort of seem to be, excited about the potential that it seems to indicate. And one of the podcasts pointed out that back when Russia was more of a threat, or maybe we would say the Soviet Union, that's when John Paul II was elected. Mm-hmm. And now we have this new Pope who we have yet to learn a lot about, but at first blush seems to be kind of an interesting, I don't know if foil would be the right word, but an interesting comparison to the current US president. And the
fact that he's American is,
and that he's, yeah. So this person was saying it's interesting that when there are these sort of threats kind of to the world order, maybe politically, that the College of Cardinals, whether it's them or whether it's some outside force kind of acting through them, seems to put into place in this position of the Pope, individuals who are kind of counter to this other action that's going on in the world or this other energy. Mm-hmm. And I just found that really interesting. Yeah. And I think it's meaningful that he's an American because although he spent a lot of time in South America, the fact that he's American and that was quite unexpected. A lot of people said that would never happen kind of in our lifetimes, and it has. Mm-hmm. It does seem like it's kind of setting up this, I don't want to say confrontation, but it's an alternative, right? Yeah. It's an alternative way for Americans to see themselves, mm-hmm. or for the world to see America. And I guess I'd just like Rebekah to say, or Gloria also, either one of you to comment a little bit more on whether anything we looked at today, whether it sort of sheds light on the meaning maybe behind the election of this particular Pope.
Yeah, Rebekah.
Well, I just think, yes, it's the Neptune in Aries, isn't it? And but what you just said, Sharon, it's absolutely like, look, you have a choice. Mm-hmm. You've got the oligarchs, the plutocrats, not just in America, but certainly in America, world leaders who are who knows what they want, but they are taking the power. They're not looking after the vulnerable people. And it's like saying, yeah, but look, this is also America. Mm-hmm. I know he's mm-hmm. lived in South America.
Well, he was born here and raised here.
Yeah.
Also, I read today, or actually yesterday, last night, that his mother has had her parents, I guess, were Creoles from Louisiana, which means he's part Black.
Oh,
which is really exciting,
Amazing.
Yeah, he has both races represented in his lineage.
Neptune has just gone into Aries, like it was March the 30th or something. It's really quite a short time ago. And here he is. Neptune goes with Christianity, but it goes with, not with Christianity as it's practiced in so many places, but with the essence of Christ consciousness, which is love thy neighbor. It's all about love your enemies. It's, and he does seem to have lived. I mean, who knows?
Yes. I mean, by all accounts that I've read from the people who have, dealt with him, and it's the admonition from Jesus, that which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me, and he seems to embody that and really try to promote that.
It's very hopeful, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I mean, right, I don't want to be too sweetness and light, because however, people who are looking at there's people who are channeling beings from the stars and astrologers. There's hope. There's an enormous amount of hope, and hope is one of the key words to go with Aquarius. Because this lineup of planets is extraordinary. It's not just that we haven't seen anything like it in our lifetimes. You look back a few hundred years, it doesn't happen. And what that means is, we're back with synchronicity that Gloria mentioned earlier on. It's like, it's time. Now is the time. Now is the time. And they're working together for, the planets will go back into, they go retrograde. Shall I go back to the charts? Lots of charts.
And I think astrology itself gives us a perspective, a higher perspective. It's like we had a speaker recently, Karen Wyatt. She used to be a hospice doctor, and she talked about having the garden view, which is the everyday consciousness, looking at what's happening in the world and the mundane kind of view, and what she called the galaxy view, which I really like those terms for the higher perspective on what's going on, seeing the whole picture and not just, the details, which is what a lot of leaders authoritarian leaders try to get us lost in the details, by doing a crazy thing every day. And as Einstein said, you can't solve a problem for the same consciousness that created it. And so astrology gives us, an opportunity and a means of looking at things from that galaxy view, seeing the whole picture. By looking at a chart, we see so much.
I absolutely love that, and I absolutely feel that, this galaxy view. I've been feeling that in my meditation recently, as though in looking at a chart and then looking into this great corridor through the dimensions and out into the universe. And I suppose it's, I don't know how it's going to happen, but we see it. This is what is happening. Neptune and Saturn are conjunct at 0 degrees of Aries at the base of the chart of the
Yes.
USA.
Yes. What do you think that could represent this conjunction of Saturn and Neptune right on the IC?
Okay, right. So Neptune goes with fantasy and delusion, and I'm so keen on the higher end of the spectrum of Neptune, but it does go with and Neptune's been journeying through Pisces, and what have we seen? The complete breakdown of truth. No,
yes, an addiction.
Addiction,
yeah.
drug addiction, alcohol addiction, food addiction, sex addiction, anything of that. It's like
it's the shadow of Neptune.
It's the shadow of Neptune. Absolutely. The higher level of Neptune is seeing into the stars and seeing the divine and feeling that flow towards unconditional love.
Yes.
But you come to planet Earth and it's not like that. And your prime minister or your president is not embodying unconditional love. And it's hard. Or your mum is not conditional, or your dad is absent or whatever, and you end up drug addiction, crime, deceit, all these things that also go with Neptune. And I just think while Neptune's been journeying through its own sign of Pisces, we've had this complete breakdown of truth. We've just seen lies and deception, happening on social media. Neptune and Jupiter go with the Nazis, with the development of propaganda, and we're seeing us, we're being manipulated this way and that way. That is all Neptune as well. So and then Saturn conjunct Neptune. I'm born with Saturn conjunct Neptune in the 1950s babies. And I think the highest expression of Saturn conjunct Neptune can be taking this, the visionary stellar light of Neptune and embodying it on planet Earth, because Saturn is Rex Mundi, the Lord of the world. He's about being here on this planet in this time. He's the Lord of time. So when Saturn meets Neptune, at exactly 0 degrees Aries, at the beginning of the zodiac, at the moment of birth, of rebirth, the potential is fantastic again, because it's not that we're all going to become drug addicts or disappear into fantasy and get lost in illusion. No, because Saturn is here, and Saturn says, get real. What is the truth? What is your responsibility? What can you do? The Saturn goes with the law, but it does go with responsibility, with duty, with grounding. Saturn is that, there it is at the base of the chart, but this is oak tree energy. I will not be, this oak tree is not going to get blown over by this hurricane of lies and deceit and abuses of power. So
responsibility. What you said about responsibility, and Saturn is the taskmaster, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The test.
It also prunes us.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first studying astrology many years ago, and I was doing some transit, and I was looking it up in the book, and it said, whatever leaves your life right now, you can be sure that it was holding you back, because Saturn only removes that which holds us back. And it can be something that we're very attached to.
Yep.
Right? So we have a lot of resistance to overcome, and that was happening in my life at that time. And when I read that, I recognized how it was holding me back. Yeah. And it just made all the difference in my attitude towards this crisis that I was going through. And I thought, yes, it was holding me back. So, So how would we apply that to Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries. What is it perhaps taking away from us collectively that is holding us back? I don't know. I'd have to
I don't quite know, because it is early days. Neptune's going to be in Aries for 14 years. Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. Uranus is going to be in Gemini for 7 or 8 years. So we're at the beginning. We're not,
but the conjunction won't be.
No, and the conjunction is around until next summer, probably.
Okay, for a year. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think it's this thing of we can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just say, "Oh, we're going to grit our teeth for 3 years and then it'll be over," because
and what you say about we can't go back. There's a lot of people say, "Oh, especially." The MAGA people, we need to go back to the 50s or we need to go back to the 40s, and it's just so ludicrous because, going back, those are the things that got us here.
Yeah.
Where we are right now. We can't go back.
No. And we can't, I don't think we can go back, to the Obama years or to.
Right. Exactly.
It's because it wasn't okay then.
Yeah. And Uranus says, "Behold, I maketh all things new," right?
Yes.
It's always forward looking, right?
And I think that, is that feeling of Neptune and Saturn on the I see is, okay, where is the ground under my feet?
Mm-hmm.
It's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Saturn is asking us to step up. Aries is a sign of it really is so much the sign of leadership. So where's, our inner authority? And Aquarius wants us, Pluto in Aquarius trining Uranus in Gemini. Find your power, find your authority.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we all come to this planet and we all get traumatized. Whether we're bringing in ancestral trauma or just an everyday accidents occur, or we're the victim of some abuse of power, whatever. So it's not a picnic. Being on this, being a human is not a picnic, and it sure is not a picnic at the moment. But we come here with that awareness before birth, that we're coming into, it's, I suppose, finding your own authority, finding your own direction. That's Saturn in Aries.
Mm-hmm.
Very much Saturn. It's
and also the fact that the North Node is there conjunct that conjunction.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is where our growth needs to come from. This is a very important.
Yeah, it really is so important.
Yeah.
And it's right down at the base of the chart. It's like, this is not about what we think or anything. This is and slavery. What are we going to do about slavery? If we think that the last time that Neptune entered Aries was the day of the American Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we in the world? The most tragic and terrifying things are happening in terms of slavery in the world. It's, it's been a very disillusioning. Talk about Neptune, the journey of Neptune through Pisces. Maybe certainly for my generation, when I was growing up, I thought, things are just going to keep on getting better, and we didn't think that it would turn back. When I was growing up, the feeling was that, oh my God, the Holocaust, oh my God, what a catastrophe, what a terrible thing. Never again. We'll never, now we see it, it's over. We'll never. And now we see it, now instead of that 21st century, think, oh, human beings who are not on a path of enlightenment can sink back into fascism. They can sink back into othering other people. They can sink back into cruelty. They can sink back into turning a blind eye on cruelty. And that's been a big wake up for it's like, oh, you know, in a way, Nazism, it wasn't a mistake. This is the shadow of human beings. This is what we do when we're frightened and wounded. Cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that the threat of fascism, the threat of cruelty, which is the negative of Saturn in Aries.
Yeah. And what you said about slavery, I was trying to apply that, you know, where are we slaves to deception and to misinformation, disinformation, and the rule of thumb, I think, when there's a conjunction of two such opposite energies, is that you go with the faster moving planet, and that is Saturn.
Yep.
And so, you know, maybe Saturn will help to, you know, bring us down to earth and reveal the truth more.
Yeah.
Sharon had something in the chat. Do you want to share it, Sharon? Something about the I Ching.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's come to mind a couple of times. So when Rebekah shared the myth of the cleaning of the stables, it reminded me very much of a hexagram. In my translations, it's called dispersing, and it has to do with floodwaters, just covering the landscape, which cleans and washes everything away, but at the same time can be very disorienting. And all the familiar landmarks that you're used to, whether they're buildings or trees or whatever, that's all been washed away. It's all gone. So it can be a fresh start, but it's also overwhelming in terms of the loss. And it just reminded me when we were talking about the stables myth, it reminded me of that hexagram. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Also, Harvey in the chat said, Neptune in Aries is the spiritual warrior.
It is.
It's a very good point. Yes, it is.
And that's kind of, in a way, with Saturn there as well, it is what we're being called to. And yes, that's good. I didn't mean to say this. There's certainly Saturn practical steps that need to be taken on Earth with the judiciary, Saturn rules, or with the police, the law. However, you know, people who are here today, there's more that we also can do, which is going out to Neptune and Uranus, which take us out to other dimensions of consciousness, to expanded states of consciousness, to you know, I just think in our times that something is happening. I wonder if I've got a slide about this that has never happened before. I haven't got a slide about it. Maybe it's this one.
What was that about economies? I'm sorry.
Oh, this, yeah, the emergence. Yeah, nope, previous one.
This.
Yeah, well, it's this one. Relationships are everything. The depths of relationship between individuals in the system, the strength of the system. Yeah, this is I mean, obviously, a lot of people are thinking about the economies. A lot of visionaries are thinking about, well, how do we do this? We don't like what we.
Yeah, because one of the strongest forces in terms of revolution is inequality.
Yes.
Right? Yep. Leads to revolution.
And I think, you know, there are sort of millionaires and billionaires out there, company executives, who are not plutocrats, who are not happy to see poor people becoming even more poor. And one of the things is they know where it will end up, because it will end up like the French Revolution, and all the revolutions. The American Revolution wasn't too bad. The French Revolution turned into a bloodbath. Everybody was killing everybody.
Yeah.
It's not the ideal way to go.
It's when activism is not informed by higher values and by higher consciousness. It's when activism is informed by the very, negative emotions of rage and frustration that feed, violence, that feeds violence.
It's just the flip side.
Exactly.
It's negative Mars, and which is Mars is the ruler of Aries, negative Aries. Mm-hmm. Throughout human history, we've had war, we've had cruelty, we've had violence. We've got King Arthur, and he has this little moment of light when he's trying to get the people with the physical strength and power to use their strength in support of the vulnerable and weak. And in various maybe tribal times, maybe that was happening, but for millennia, it hasn't been like that. And that's the sort of challenge that we are facing. It's not a little challenge. It's not so much about local elections or something like that. It's like, can we create a different society? Mm-hmm. Can we really make a society? And that's what Teilhard de Chardin was seeing. Look, we can do this. We can go forward. We can embrace, open to more and more love. And that is one of the things that I think is happening now that has never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the coming together. And this is what we can all do, is meet with other people and meditate together, or meditate on your own. It's like Neptune in Aries or Uranus in Gemini, almost the most important thing you can do is meditate.
Yeah.
Because then you come back down to that oak tree energy, down to the root, down to the ground. And
then when you do your activism, it is what Andrew Harvey.
Yes, I know
called sacred activism.
Yes.
And what Amit Goswami, who was our speaker on Wednesday, calls quantum activism. Coming from a consciousness, a higher consciousness, informing, that is activism from love, right? Yeah. Instead of anger and fear. Sharon also asked in the chat if you could recommend any starter books by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Oh, yeah.
Also a beginner Arthurian legend book or series of books.
Right. Teilhard de Chardin, he wrote so much.
Yes.
But I suppose...
the Phenomenon of Man.
I think you start with the Phenomenon of Man.
Would you? I wasn't sure which one. He wrote that. What was the other one? I can't think of them.
They're on my bookshelf.
Yeah, they're on mine too, but my bookshelf is across the room. Let's see.
Future of Man. I think maybe the first one that I read was The Future of Man. Yeah, I would not know where to begin because they're very inspiring.
Yes.
And the Arthurian legends, well, I had a book when I was a child which I love, and I should look for a contemporary one. I bet there are people writing now. Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of dense.
There was the Divine Milieu. That was another one. The Divine Milieu.
That's Teilhard de Chardin. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and if I think of it, I'm going to look because I'd forgotten, and I was thinking about Neptune and Aries. What, and it just suddenly came to me.
His concept of the noosphere, as this, kind of, it's almost like a World Wide Web on a consciousness level, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that is very interesting that he felt, well, I'm not an expert on Teilhard de Chardin, but I love I love his work.
You know, I think that's the point of everything that's happening.
Mm.
Is that creation of that energy connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've said to you
Yeah.
before, Gloria, when I was the last time I went to the States and I was flying back, and I was
Mm-hmm.
on my plane, and I saw it. I saw all the little meditation groups and therapy groups all over the world, but particularly the groups where they're calling in the light, and they're little beacons, but there's millions of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they are forming a grid, they're forming a network of light around the world. And you don't hear about that in the
No.
news. You know, in
Right.
the news, we hear about we are being, manipulated by the media to go back into fear and separation and anger and so on. And we don't hear about this network that is building, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not exactly consciously, but it's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that is, we don't like what's happening. We don't know what to do about it, and so on. And yet, what we can do is meditate. And you talk about quantum activism. It isn't it going to the quantum level, and especially with, in groups.
Yes, the
And
non-locality, the non-local
yeah,
level.
and holding that vibration of peace and love, because
Mm-hmm.
when we meditate, when you really get into the zone, when you're meditating, there is no hatred, there
Mm-hmm.
is no wanting to kill somebody, there is no wanting to defeat somebody, and then you come back into everyday reality, and then you want to, beat up your neighbor because they're making too much noise or whatever. It's very difficult being human with it. This
Yeah.
massive spectrum of going from the density of being human and reaching then out. But I
Yeah.
think that is happening. Whether,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, um, everybody's meditating, and we all, so many people are getting guidance and little bits of channeling and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, which were not heard of when I was a child. Nobody was channeling. It was something that, Joan of Arc did. It was mystical.
Mm-hmm.
It was saints. And now we're all doing it.
and and and
Yeah.
recognizing that we're not alone
And
is a huge part of it, and that is something that I think really needs to be discovered by all of us who are trying to, to operate on a higher consciousness level, or even to reach a higher consciousness level, and trying to do what we think is, going to benefit the world and humanity. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that people tend to feel alone in that struggle, and we need to know we're not alone, not only because there's so many of us doing it, which is not evident because we're the quiet ones, we tend to be the quiet ones.
yes.
But also because we each have, as you were just alluding to, we each have guides. We each have, and this is our next program, a week from, well, when is it? On the 16th, is about how to connect with our personal guide, our guardian angel, whatever you want to call it. So that, not only can we get the guidance, but we also realize that we're not alone.
Yeah.
No, that's so important.
So important. I mean, if you do nothing else, do that. It's because every time that we meditate and we connect with the other dimensions, and we feel that loving presence, then we're embodying that. We're doing that oak tree thing. We're bringing it down onto the planet, and we don't know how it affects things, but it sure does affect things.
Yeah.
And this,
About your class.
I can talk about my class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you want to do this first, but we're almost at, well, we have
Okay.
7 minutes. So if you
Okay.
want to talk about this first.
Just to, well, it's just that one of the things that's happening because we're in Aquarius and because Pluto's in Aquarius and because we're entering the age of Aquarius, I think something is happening that we are able to understand Aquarius in a way that was not possible in the 20th century, because I think just that sort of stuff we're talking about, going to the quantum dimension, hearing from guidance and stuff, these are Pisces, Aquarius, Neptune, Uranus things. Neptune and Uranus open us up to higher dimensions of thought. I don't want to say, that sounds terribly hierarchical. But
no, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. I think they are, all three of those planets, the outer planets, remain latent until we are ready to energize them, activate them. And we do that through raising our own consciousness. And then they can really.
And I feel like they are waiting there. The angels, the energies, the planetary energies are, they're ready to come through. And I don't know what that would look like, but I feel, that is occurring. And well, I suppose that does bring me to my, that's my book, by the way.
Charting the Soul.
Oh, and yes, you can contact me at chartingthesoul@gmail.com. This, so the course that I'm wanting to do, I've been an astrologer most of my adult life. And the thing that does not appeal to me is getting lost in the technicalities of the astrology and when is the next eclipse and when is Mercury retrograde and oh dear, and I'm, or the way that young people tend to approach astrology is trying to fix their lives. And for me, it's so much like go beyond that. I guess when you're older, you can be more accepting of life and the difficulties that it presents. And meet the archetypes, meet the planets, get to know the planets. I haven't done that, and I meant to do that. I meant to give us a little guided meditation. But what I'll be doing when my course will meet, we'll meet Uranus. We'll talk about Uranus. We'll talk about Aquarius, and we'll talk about AI and our anxieties about that. But in the end, what I do on my longer courses, go into a little guided meditation and bring Uranus right in. And where is it in your own body, in your own energy field? How is it working? How is Mercury? How is Venus? I had a client the other day who came because she's an astrologer and her Venus was sad. She was living this hardworking life and we had to meet with Venus. What does Venus need? And that's my whole way of working, really, is you meet each one of the main planets and have a chance in meditation to find it in your own energy field, in your own life, and where is that energy wanting you to go? And never with a big pressure. There's never a big, overpowering thing. It's just, where can I have more Uranus? Where can my Mercury open up the communication in my life? Where is it blocked? And how can and how can this wonderful deity assist me in my communication? And with Venus, where am I not happy? Where do I, where can I give love? Where can I receive love? Where can I find happiness? And with Mars, and I do think Mars and this Neptune in Aries is very important in our times, because I think certainly when I was, 20th century, when I was learning about healing and so on, an awful lot of very, very nice people, an awful lot of spiritual bypass. And a lot of people as well with a strong Neptune and no boundaries, and they were sort of just giving in every direction. And then they were getting sick because they just, burnt out. And so I think in our times, I do think that people who do healing are being called, where are your boundaries? Where's your leadership and where are your boundaries? Get real. I suppose that's Saturn conjunct Neptune. But certainly, anyway, that's the intention with my approach to astrology. Is not just for me to be sort of giving all the information, people to find it in their own path, in their own spirituality, and in their own energy field. Yep.
You're giving them the tools.
Yes, absolutely.
For their own self-discovery and growth, and how they can best make a contribution to
yes, because we've all come here to do something. We all have something to give, without a doubt. Yeah. And I suppose, yes, one of the things that worries me about astrology, if it's too shallow, is that the astrologer becomes the big authority. Yeah. And the person is saying, well, will this be okay? And will that be okay? And rather, let's find that Saturn in yourself, and then, then you're the authority.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, Rebekah, let me know when you have a starting date, and I will let people know. And this has been really, really thought-provoking and helpful, I think. Thank you so much for your time and expertise in this area that is so important. And thank you all for joining today.
Yes.
Thank you.
And absolute pleasure to be with everybody. Yep.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Oh, thank you very much. It's always wonderful to come and, because I know that I'm talking to people who know what, who know this work.
Thank you, Rebekah and Gloria.
Take care.
Okay. Bye then.
Bye.
Lots of love.